Peter Mandelson, whilst a minister, actually stayed in Epstein's mansion in New York, but at that time, Epstein was in prison over a sex trafficking offence.
Why has Keir Starmer picked a friend of Jeffrey Epstein as Britain's new ambassador to Donald Trump's America? Starmer's choice, Lord Peter Mandelson, is not a diplomat, but an arch-Blairite fixer turned businessman whose lobbying firm has represented Chinese tech giant TikTok. So can Peter Mandelson be trusted to promote UK national interests in Washington? And what does his appointment tell us about the Starmer project? Joining me to discuss this is Solomon Hughes, a veteran investigative journalist who has worked for decades with Ian Hislop at Private Eye magazine. Great to have you with us, Solomon.
Hi, great to be here.
Thanks, Solomon. Could we just start by getting your reaction? What did you think when you first heard that Starmer had appointed Peter Mandelson to be British ambassador in Washington?
I don't know. It's one of those things where you do a double take, as you often do with Keir Starmer's government, where one part of your mind expects it because it's the worst possible thing that could happen, and that's what tends to happen. And another part of your mind goes, "What?" He was a minister under Tony Blair, and then and Gordon Brown. He kept being a minister, then not being a minister because he kept having to resign because of various scandals. And then since 2010, so for the past, 15 years, he's really been a lobbyist, really run a lobbying company or a sort of corporate advisory company, I think they would call it, a company that helps big businesses and ultra high net worth individuals, rich people in old money. Starmer is an Atlanticist, so he wants to curry favour with America, and if that means currying favour with Donald Trump, so be it. We've seen. But he's also very, very reliant on this old guard of sort of Blairites.
You have politicians, my friends, who are now on the front bench in the Labour Party.
And as it turns out, for reasons, Trump is really winding him up over Mandelson and he's, threatening not to recognise Mandelson as ambassador.
I consider my remarks about President Trump as ill-judged and wrong. I think that he has won fresh respect. He certainly has from me, and that is going to be the basis of all the work I do as His Majesty's ambassador in the United States.
So we're caught in a weird contradiction where Starmer's so keen on these kind of old Blairites that he's picked Mandelson, and then he's got himself in trouble with Trump, which he doesn't like. So, I mean, it's there's a conflict there, and it's one that needn't have been there, really.
Absolutely. And I think for many people who maybe don't have any particular strong political feelings, they might have come across Mandelson because of those photographs of him with Jeffrey Epstein, the elite money manager, paedophile, sex trafficker. And they might wonder why someone who was friends with Epstein or appears to have been a friend of Epstein should be allowed to represent the UK abroad. In the article that you've just written for us about Peter Mandelson, you kind of explain very well the contact that those two men have had over the years.
So Peter Mandelson, going back to the late 1990s and early, the first Blair Labour government. He was one of the architects of New Labour, and very crudely, New Labour was all right. We are the Labour Party representing the interests of workers, but why don't we really, really get in bed with big business?
We're off camera. Off camera.
And he would do anything really to push that agenda, including getting in bed with the worst possible business people or corporations. I mean, and really that's the context of Jeffrey Epstein, his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It was while he was a minister, he got friendly with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a middleman, a maneuverer. He set up various financial funds and worked for banks and put them in touch with rich people and just managed to get a bit of money on the side. We now know that part of him doing that was him actually being a sex trafficker who exploited underage girls. And he did that for himself. And there's a suggestion or a feeling that actually that was actually even part of his business approach, helping supply, sex for friends. Now none of that's been proved, but we do know he was a sex trafficker and a sex abuser. I think Peter Mandelson wanted to get him in relations with him because Mandelson wanted people who had access to big business, particularly Epstein had access to J.P. Morgan, the massive bank. And we know about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. There were J.P. Morgan had done a piece of research saying, "Oh God, how involved were we with him?" And it included many, many, many emails between J.P. Morgan bankers and Epstein. But in them, Epstein keeps boasting about his friendship with Peter Mandelson. He says Peter Mandelson is effectively the deputy prime minister, and I'm close to him. So this is about 2009. He keeps calling Peter Mandelson Petey, my friend Petey. So it's very, very friendly. It's clear that they're close. Peter Mandelson, whilst a minister, actually stayed in Epstein's mansion in New York. But at that time, Epstein was in prison over a sex trafficking offence. But I think we could assume, or I would personally assume, that he wanted to be friends with someone who was friends with the rich and who was himself rich. He wanted to be friends with someone who was close to what were then the giants of the economy, people like J.P. Morgan, and he was willing to overlook the gross scandals around Epstein to do that.
Allegedly stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's house when he was imprisoned. Do you think these allegations will have any bearing in your ability, in your own words, to lend dignity to the university?
I don't think so, no. I certainly regret ever meeting him in the first place. Had I known what he was and what was transpired, I would have thought better of it.
In the new Labour government, he said we should be intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich. And he is intensely relaxed about people who are filthy rich. You know, he thinks they're the good guys, even if all the rest of us might think, well, they look a bit filthy, really.
And why do you think Keir Starmer's prepared to put up with this, to promote someone like this to a high office? I mean, for most people, that kind of association would kind of finish them politically. But is it because he was so important during the Corbyn years in trying to sabotage the left, and Starmer depends so much on the right of the party that he feels like he has to reward them in some way?
Peter Mandelson famously said he does something every day to try and undermine Jeremy Corbyn. He's still close to some of the machine people, the kind of organisers who helped Starmer come to power. He's personally close to them. There's an element of that. I think there's also an element that just there is just a kind of weakness at the heart of the Starmer project, is that they don't really have a very strong mission or even a very good set of friends. When New Labour came to power, they appointed their favourite businessmen and their people from their favourite think tanks, and people politically connected them to all the boards and appointments and every piece of patronage government could do. And you kind of, I mean, Team Starmer have done that a bit, but not amazingly. One of the key things going on is that they are impressed with Peter Mandelson because he transitioned from politics to business. So he leaves government in 2010, creates this company, Global Counsel, which offers, this is actually what it says on the website. So it says it helps corporations who, quote, who want to see opportunities in politics, regulation and public policy. So it's just saying, we'll sort out your political difficulties, no problem. It seems quite big. It's got about a £60 million turnover, I think, last time I looked. According to the accounts, they currently owe Peter Mandelson, his own company owes him £1.3 million. So he's got a little bit of money coming from it. But I think that in some ways the Starmer government is impressed by that, because, and if you look at it, some of the companies they represent companies including Palantir, the sort of defense-oriented IT company owned by Peter Thiel, who is close to Trump. They represent J.P. Morgan, strangely enough. They've represented, oil company. So it seems like he's a kind of a bit of a big business whisperer, and they may have been impressed by that. Although, as it turns out, that is one of the problems. That is one of the areas where they're getting into trouble with Trump, who's pulling faces.
Yeah, and I just wondered, like, is this allowed for someone to become an ambassador who has all these business interests? I mean, are there any rules on that? Is this just another case of the kind of Westminster chumocracy, where actually, if you move in the right circles, you can kind of get away with a lot of things that normally, would seem to be a clear conflict of interest?
Are there rules on that? Yes, it's a question, and it's one I've asked, but I'm not entirely clear that I've got an answer. It suddenly occurred to me, actually, just briefly after you contacted me and said, should we have a quick look at Peter Mandelson becoming ambassador? It suddenly occurred to me, I thought, well, what is happening with his ownership of his company? So I went to the Foreign Office and I said, well, now he's an ambassador, he's got this shareholding in this company. Is he allowed to keep the shareholding, or would he have to sell off the shares? And they gave me a very odd answer. There is an established regime in place for the management of interests held by ambassadors or high commissioners. This ensures that steps are taken to avoid or mitigate any actual, potential, or perceived conflicts of interest. So, are there rules? There are rules. There is, in fact, a established regime. We don't exactly know what that established regime is. We're trying to find that out. There's a distinct possibility he wouldn't complete a full term as ambassador, in which case he'd want to jump back to Global Counsel. And they're actually opening offices in Washington, D.C., which they didn't do before. Now they've got offices now. They've just opened them. So they've just opened offices in Washington just as, Peter Mandelson becomes ambassador. So it does go a bit wonky, and he has to run. He won't have to go far, will he? From the embassy, he'll be able to walk or get a cab maybe, or a lift to the offices of his own current, if not or slightly former company.
This seems like a scandal in the making. So, we'll keep following your work, Solomon. Your article is on our website, declassifieduk.org. If people are watching this video and they haven't subscribed to this channel before, please hit the button below. It helps the video reach a wider audience. And you can also donate to Declassified through the Super Thanks button. And that helps us do more investigations like this. Thanks for watching.